Now every gambler knows the secret to surviving is knowing what to throw away, knowing what to keep. 'Cause every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser, and the best you can hope for is to die.
Listen, I understand why he's, why he makes these builds, but he's certainly, and he must have regretted it, right? Almost immediately.
He did, because I went back to him and I said, "Hey, look, Josh, you know what? This one stings." I said, it really stung, like when you did that." And I said, "What?" And I coached him through a couple of things, right? And that is that, and this is what I've learned from you, Ed, as well, is give people hope. If you take hope away from them, they're going to do irrational things, and it's not going to work to your benefit, especially when you're the one who took that hope away. They're going to do irrational things. So you're driving me into a position where I'm going to start to do things that are irrational. They're not going to benefit you. They're going to benefit Jordan, and they're going to benefit others. Or you can, if you give me Denmark back, we'll consider it even, and I'm totally comfortable with that. And so he said, "Okay, you know what? I'm happy to take the risk. You take Denmark."
I could tell just because he didn't double down on the stab by building an STP like he should have if he wanted to follow through.
Correct. And that was a discussion. We had a great discussion, and that was part of that discussion as well.
Although you didn't necessarily have the kindest of hearts if we go to the fall, if I remember correctly. You take Keel back and you make the move. I assume this is just sort of, hey, Jordan, I'm really, really, really attacking Josh this time.
So here's what happened. Was I went to Josh and I said, "Look, you know what? I'm not going to get anywhere against France if he's winning, if he's getting a build. He's got Munich here. So just take Munich. Take Munich back. You get all three of the Russian centers.
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, all three of the German centers. Take it back. Force him back. If he's getting a build and I'm getting a build, I'm not going to be able to get anywhere here. I'm just going to be stuck in neutral. I'm going to be stuck at 6 centers. And you know that I don't see a path forward for future growth for me." And he said, "No, I don't want to take Munich. I don't want to do it no matter what. I just don't want it." And then at this point, Jordan was now offering me Kiel. And I said, "Look, you know what? I got to try to find a way to get back in this game." And Josh is not giving me that. Yeah, it was really nice of him to give me Denmark back, but he owed me that. But if I don't make this move, even though I would prefer not to work with Jordan. I don't have a choice. Like there's no other option here, because if Jordan and I are each getting, if Jordan and I are each getting a build, I'm going to be stuck at 6 indefinitely, right?
This makes no sense to me. What you're telling me makes no sense to me. At a minimum, he should have told you, "I'll take Munich," and not do it.
Right.
But because he's only inducing you to attack him if he doesn't want Munich. You need Munich gone to attack him, which Josh needs, because wow, more stunning news here broken on the program.
Yeah. So this was the problem, was Josh refused to take Munich. And I was begging him. I was like, "Buddy, come on, like you got to take it, because I got nowhere else to go otherwise." And he flat out refused. And then I said, "Okay, well, you know what? I got to do this."
Instead, he'd rather make another enemy out of Italy.
Yeah. I don't think he was in full control of his units anymore, Ed. I think at this point Bradley was calling the shots.
It's quite stunning, because if that was me and I knew this, no offense, I'd be taking Norway and I'd building in St. Peter. Like, if you're like, either attack you or don't, but if just sterilizing you isn't a plan unless you want to be attacked.
Yeah. And part of this could just be inexperience on Josh's part.
Yeah. but it's Jordan, the one who says that Russia's like a shark, right? You got to keep growing or you die. And here he's spinning plates. He's on the offense and defense and doesn't know what to do. And it happens. I mean, my whole season two, I wrote a 300-page AAR about this, right? All the things that go through your head, but you got to look at the map. You got to think what the other players need to do to succeed.
For sure.
It's a big lesson. And so now you build your two armies, and we get to the key move here. I think it's in 08. But another army by Jordan. I remember at the time being stunned by that. What was this? Did you know that was going to happen?
Hmm.
And what do you think is going to happen?
He told me that that army would be flexible enough to go to Piedmont, and that he'd also push into from Munich to Silesia or Munich to Tyrolia. Those were going to be his plays, so that the intention here was to continue to slow down Josh, get easy builds. He wanted to continue to be an army power. And he said that he's actually even open to pushing against Italy at that period of time. And again, you know, I was hesitant. But I had the two armies on land, and I sat there thinking, like, is he going to stab me? Like, because you know what, like, it's possible that he would stab me, but we just spent 3 game years finally getting to the point where we could actually trust each other, where we actually coordinated on a set of moves. So what are the chances that he's actually going to stab me right here? And if he doesn't, I'm looking really good, right? Now that army gets in, like, those armies get into position, and now all of a sudden my position's fantastic. But I said, like, what are the chances that the guy spent 3 game years to try to reconcile, like, this is like, and these were intense, these were not easy negotiations, right? This was like really, really difficult, intense, and sometimes bitter negotiations between the two of us. And finally we were on the same page for one turn. And I thought, like, what are the chances that he's actually going to do this? But even then, before the spring adjudicated, I was like, you know what, my deal with Jordan here, because he wanted me to move English Channel to north and north to Heligoland. And I said, nah, I'm not leaving myself that wide open. And I said, but I'd be open if you're telling me you're going to back away, then I might be open to going to Wales. I said, because at least then I have some protection. I still have protection over the English Channel. I still have another unit around Liverpool. And we can still do this. Like, there's the possibility is still there. But in the back of my mind, before the turn, I was like, maybe I should go English Channel to the Irish Sea, because it's just as safe a position, and it doesn't threaten him at all. But then again, I said, why do I want, like, this guy wants to finally work with me? Like, I see the path forward here to do really, really well and to get into commanding position. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to upset him? Like, maybe I'll just go back to Wales. Worst case scenario, he takes Holland. I have a great relationship with Russia. We'll go right back to where we were. And even if I'm at 6 and he's at 8, he's still the big threat. We still have 5 game years to go here. I still have an opportunity to come back. 6 center Russia or England after 1908 is still a fairly playable position if you still have Russia on board on your side. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't ground the army. Not
Yeah,
unless you're really in threat.
Now, in Russia's defense, and also in mine, the intent here for me was to set up in a way that we could take Berlin and set up against Russia, right? So he's not entirely at fault for this stab because I this was a setup where I would have the option of either going at Russia or I hadn't actually broken any of my deals because we had arranged to bounce in Norway and everything else was fine. And I thought, well, Russia can't really be comfortable in this spot because he only has one army to protect all of Germany. There's no like France has a huge advantage in that position. So, you know what, even if this doesn't work out, Russia has to see that this current situation, like it's not going to benefit him, right? Because he can't hold whatever he gets in Germany anyways, and he's just creating a monster France.
Why are I've never looked at the orders, but why is either Norwegian or North? I guess North is convoying to London to Denmark, Edinburgh to Norway, but did 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 you? I guess you didn't think of bounces. Did you arrange a bounce in Norway?
Edinburgh was arranged,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Edinburgh and Sweden
the
bouncing
army.
in Norway was arranged. That was arranged. That was something that both Josh and I thought would be beneficial, and that would work quite well for us.
And then the London convoy is strategic. If Jordan's on his side, there's no problems. And if he isn't, he has two armies on the island. So
Correct.
it's a strategic chain bounce.
You got it.
It's quite brilliant.
And I remember you keep saying he's not going to stab Riaz with two armies on the island, is he? He's not going to stab Riaz with two armies on the island, is he?
He picks
And I
the
was
worst
thinking the same
time.
thing. Like
And
there
even
were
Cedric
two
said
armies there.
he's got to keep it in his pants. There's no way he's going to do it.
Like, go West Africa, North Africa, get Tunis, build in Brest, then pivot or something. I don't know, but this is
I mean,
insane.
admittedly, it doesn't look like it's going to be super effective in the beginning.
Yeah.
It turns out to be super effective. You know, so again, more diplomacy with Josh getting Kiel back.
Yep.
Tell us what's going on.
So the pitch was pretty simple here, right? In that he's not going to be able to hold whatever he has in and around Germany. And he has a great chance to win. He's a 9 center Russia. Even if he goes down one, he's still an 8 center Russia. And that's still an excellent position. And he still has a great chance to top this board. And really, like, me going down 2 here would just, I mean, I was telling the whole board, I'm just going to throw this game to Jordan. If Josh is not backing off here, I'm just going to throw this game to Jordan because I'm going to be at 5, and Josh seems to be happy with it, and so Jordan wins the game. And the East, I think something happened where they really upset Josh in that they had arranged something with him where he was going to back off. And this was also the spring turn was also one where Bradley actually warned me. So I know you'd mentioned that earlier, that something fishy seems to be going on, but Bradley is so good at disrupting tempo and causing people to be suspicious of each other that I just I considered it, but again, it was like, is Jordan going to stab me like one turn after we finally, got back on the same page, right? And that was a huge mistake on my part.
For context, 3 years is a quarter of the game.
Yep.
Quarter of the game.
Yep.
Quarter of the game down the drain.
Yep.
And he's coming back for more.
Yeah, and I thought at this point that it was just going to be a situation where he was not going to gain anymore, that he was going to be stuck at 8 indefinitely, and that it was going to be somebody in the East who came out on top.
Now, does Jordan blame you for this step too?
Nope.
I imagine not a lot of talking.
No, and at this point, I told him, look, you know what? After this stab, I don't see a way of me ever being comfortable helping you top the board. I told him, I said, look, there's just no way I'd ever be comfortable at this point with you topping the board. And he saw that as a threat. And I said, look, the threat is you being in Holland and Irish Sea and the English Channel. And I continued being honest with him. And, he didn't necessarily appreciate that. But hey, that's not my problem.
All right. Well, why the Army Liverpool?
It was a good question. It was gonna have to be one of the two armies on the continent. It couldn't be a fleet because I'd never be able to expand again. That would just kill any chance of me growing. And I didn't want to pull Army Denmark because if I did, then all of Germany was lost. So you have to realize that at this point, I was still working with Josh. And we would not be able to stop France if I pulled Army Denmark. Kiel would be gone. Berlin would be gone pretty quickly.
Yeah, Liverpool's pretty much your only choice because if you pull London, then you have fleet guesses, and it can be messy. So
yeah,
you did right.
Yeah, I didn't want to give up risk losing the North Sea.
Right.
Well, I was surprised. I think that it wasn't Fleet Kiel because I think Kiel was lost no matter what.
No, there were things that we talked about. Again, this was Josh stabbing again.
Yep.
So and this was where I took particular offense at Josh because I'm a stab if it's a good stab. Don't lie to me just for no reason. If you're gonna lie to me because you're stabbing and it's to your benefit. Don't just lie to me just for the sake of lying. So what Josh told me was that he was working on things with Italy and with myself. They were really struggling to find some common ground because I think there was something about some of the stuff that happened in the game that Greg was really, really hesitant to do anything. And I was trying to set up an EIR. And I think you guys also talked about the EIR. So it was almost like you were reading my mind, Ed, that this was the alliance that had to emerge here. But the two of them were never able to make it work. Josh did this he says out
Totally
of
inexplicable. It could have been stopped. It could have been stopped here.
Yep. And in addition to that, Josh told me that he had actually worked things out with Italy because I told him, look, you know what? I played a game where I was France, and this was the DBNI final, right? And I pointed to it and I said, Brandon was really good at keeping me in check by just bouncing one unit. Like I had a fleet.
Brandon played Italy.
He played Italy. I played France, and he just slowed my role in the game just by bouncing one of my southern fleets with him. And we had one fleet each just bouncing around in Western Med, Gulf of Lyon for a little while, and it just completely stunted my momentum in that game in the DBNI final. And I told him, I said, why don't you do the same thing? I said, why don't you tell Jordan that you're just going to bounce Vienna with Munich and just do it indefinitely? Because that takes the threat away from Kiel. It takes the threat away from Berlin. Jordan's going to have to do it. He has to bounce in Tyrolia because he doesn't want anybody in Tyrolia.
And he's not going to lose anything.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Josh convoys into Berlin, convoys his army into Berlin. Or sorry, no, he was going to move Livonia to Moscow to protect. And then Baltic Sea was going to support Denmark into Kiel. Silesia goes to Berlin, and then there was going to be a tap or a bounce between Munich and Vienna. So now all of a sudden he has his units in the position that he wants them. Right, and that was the arrangement. And he didn't need to tell me that he had successfully arranged the bounce into Rolia with France. Because obviously he didn't. And that was a lie that to me, it was like, well, look, you know what, buddy? You're attacking the one guy who can hold France back. Like if you're just throwing the game, fine. Like, why are we wasting our time anymore?
Well, the other thing is, I think he's got to realize that this moveset does not guarantee him Norway, but it damn sure almost guarantees Jordan Berlin.
Absolutely.
This is a bad set overall. Even the East is very messy. Like he could have supported out of Sev. He's holding Budapest like there's going to be three on it, and there's just no way Italy's giving that to Bradley here.
Yep. And he said he was not able to make any traction with Italy and Turkey, with either one of them. And so he decided that he was going to help Jordan win the game by punishing me, who'd been his ally and helpful in putting his needs in front of his own pretty much the whole game, right? And sure, I mean that's part of the game. Sure, I mean it happens, and it's happened to all of us, I'm sure. But
Not when you're
to
top.
me, I was like, dude, you're an 8 center Russia. You have every bit as chance to win as everybody else. Italy and Turkey are not going to work together forever. You stay at 7, keep yourself viable. You're going to come back in this game because Italy's going to need your help, or Turkey's, one of the two of them are going to need your help. You're going to get growth there. Don't give up on the game. And he gave up on the game. And the thing is, I warned him. I said, look, if you're going to stab, me, that turn where he took Denmark. I warned him. I said, the minute you do that and you make that kind of play, you're going to turn this into a balance of power game, and you need to be prepared for how balance of power works with the switches back and forth between people to try to balance the board. I said, you're going to get frustrated by that kind of play because it's not the way that you like to play. And sure enough, he got frustrated, and he made a play that I think he still had a legitimate chance to win the game. But this play really put Jordan in cruise control.
Yeah. And it doesn't really, I mean, everything from here, I mean, so he takes Denmark. The interesting thing, Riaz, is that, Jordan stabbed you multiple times and never got anything on the continent. He did it with 5 armies, basically taking Germany, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what he did. He took the neutrals in Germany to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, after this,
Crazy.
it feels like everything went to gunboat. I mean, no one's really working to stop France at this point.
Pretty much. And I tried, like I bounced Jordan out of the mid-Atlantic so that Italian fleets could get into the Gulf of Lion and Western Med,
Yep.
and to the point where they could push France back, but nobody wanted to do it. And I'm obviously the guy losing dots, so I'm just going to continue losing ground.
I can kind of understand why Greg doesn't move in the fall, because I think the reason is, in Greg's mind, Jordan's getting a build, and he's got to be worried about that build. And as it turns out, he should have been worried about that build. It's a Fleet Marseille.
Mm-hmm.
But
How they got Russian on board though? They had 4 on keel. That wasn't a guaranteed build.
Yeah, that
it's just getting Russia on board, and I think if Italy really wanted to, we could have done it.
I'm curious about these disbands, because these are pro-Russian disbands. I want to go back to something you said about 10 minutes ago, right? That
Sure.
you threatened to throw the game. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about, because and I know, and Keith knows, that threatening to throw doesn't mean you're throwing, but it's kind of a trump card in a way. And sometimes people react well to it, and sometimes people react poorly to it. Like, I know that Greg doesn't give it any countenance whatsoever. people, he doesn't like that's just like breathing to Greg. People threatening to throw, but then other people I know, like Russ, like melt down at throwing threats. When you are savvy enough to know that saying that has an effect, but the problem is you can't keep saying, you either have to throw or you don't. But here, why are we getting pro Russian and not pro Jordan disbands if we had that threat to throw?
Heligoland was going to be gone no matter what. There was no value in keeping Heligoland around. Norway was a request from Bradley. He said, I'm trying to make something work with Russia. And the best way to make that work is if you pull Norway, that'll give me a chance to make things work with Josh.
God,
And so I sort of
understand
had
that.
this, I had this sort of in my mind, and I think Ed, you play similarly as well, of like, when I have no chance to win, I want to try to help somebody else win. And I had my power rankings of who I wanted to help win out of the 4 players, and number 1 was Bradley. Number 2 was Greg, and then you keep going down as far as you possibly can. Number 3 would actually be more like number 100,000, but there's not 100,000 players, and that would be Josh. And then number 1 million or so would be Jordan. Like,
Yeah.
and there's some backstory to this, and there was a personal exchange right around this time of the game between Jordan and I, where I tried to tell him why I was so upset with him, and I tried to explain it to him, just because if he would have come to me with humility at that point and said, you know what, Riaz, I get that I did something that offended you. You're not normally the type of player, it happens only very rarely where you lose, your friendliness. And you know what, if whatever it is I've done, I'm willing to accept that as a learning experience, and I apologize to you for it. I mean, it didn't have to be this grandiose apology. All I had to do was say, look, you know what? I totally get it. Like, I've obviously done something wrong to upset you. So I apologize for it. We move on. I probably would have been more than happy to have him win. I would have then at that point been more than happy to, but his reaction was actually the complete opposite. And it was one where he was like, he built up this wall, because I told him, I said, look, I'm probably going to talk a little bit about this on the Diplomats, because there was something that really bothered me, but I want to talk to you about it first. And he took it as this grand threat that I was going to ruin his reputation. And that I was going to publicly attack him so that nobody would ever work with him again. And so he took it the wrong way. And then he was really abrasive about it. And then I said, look, I came here to make peace. You don't want to make peace? Fine, no problem. You are now the player that I hate the most in diplomacy. You are my Farron Jane.
I don't hate Baron Jane.
Yeah, but
we
just
never
can't
get
work
along.
Together, right? Yeah. On a board you can't get along. I go for a drink.
We just can't.
With him, but yeah, I mean, I just couldn't. At that point, and at that point there was vitriol. Like, I was now at this point telling the board about how much I despised Jordan and his personality and the way that he's kind of treated the end game with me and the overall game, and that this was more personal than it normally would be. And so I think most of the players kind of got the message, and one of them must have told Jordan at some point, and it'll I think you'll see it after 19. I'll talk a little bit more about that after 1910.
So, here it's just sort of tactics for you. You lose Norway, which I'm sure you knew you were going to lose.
Yeah.
And
Is
you have to
Russia
do this.
actually throwing here? Because he could have supported himself in the keel.
Hmm.
Yeah, we wondered about this
Russia gave up on the game.
mentally.
I think mentally he was done. And also he figured that he had no chance to win at this point, even though he was an 8 center Russia. And that if he's not going to win, then France is going to win the game.
Yeah, you got to keep fighting because crazy things happen. All you got to do is turn Italy.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but I mean, especially now, right? Because you have 3 fleets on Mid-Atlantic. God, if Greg had just moved one fleet, the Mid-Atlantic could have been dislodged. I mean, there's like a lot of problems here for
Yep.
France.
Or he would have if Greg moves those 2 fleets, he has Spain is locked in for him.
Yeah, as we pointed out multiple times,
Yeah.
because you were going to cut Mid-Atlantic, could have
Yep.
had Spain in the fall.
Yep.
And instead, he got nothing.
Yep.
I'm sure this was pointed out to him, though.
This this was pointed out to him, but he, for some reason, I think he had also kind of given up on winning, and I think he thought that, look, if I make this move, I may be increasing my chance of winning, but I'm probably going to increase Bradley's chance of winning much more than my own.
Exactly what we
And
said.
and there's no reason Bradley's never done anything to deserve that kind of play from me. So I'm just not going to do that.
Did you ever admire, like, I know you said Bradley, if you could win, Bradley was number 2 on the power rankings, but Bradley just made so many great guesses in this game. It's just like
Yeah.
stunning, actually.
Yeah, it was really, really well played on his part.
Um, Meanwhile, frankly, the game gets kind of boring here. After Russia sort of, gives up, but you lose the channel. Ultimately, it doesn't. I'm just kind of going through here because it doesn't really matter. You know, it
So
just doesn't
do you want to
matter.
pause for a second there, because there's something interesting that you would have no idea of the
Yeah,
dynamic.
absolutely.
Maybe let's go back to fall 1910. You notice where that Russian army is in Norway?
I do notice that.
And you notice that North Atlantic went to Norwegian?
I do notice that as well.
Can you kind of guess what you think might have started going through my head?
I assumed there was a convoy to Edinburgh that, that we had a discussion about on the show. I mean, that was the only thing we were like stretching for content, and we're like, well, is Riaz going to try and throw this to Josh here by telling him he can get Edinburgh in 1911, Liverpool in 1912, something like that?
So I hadn't considered it at the time, but I thought moving to Norwegian would be more interesting than just sitting there doing nothing. And then all of a sudden, I got a message from Greg saying that Jordan is really worried that you're going to throw the game to Russia by convoying into Edinburgh. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, "Wow, you know what? This is certainly a possibility now. I hadn't really considered it." And I'm like, well, maybe, you know what? Even though I'm not happy with Josh, I'm upset with Josh. I'd rather have him win than Jordan. And then this is the point where I think Jordan asked Bradley to retreat to Livonia because he was really worried about rather than Sevastopol, because he was really worried about the potential of um, an army in Norway being convoyed over, and then another army from St. Petersburg going to Norway. And now all of a sudden, 2 of my centers uh, go to Russia, and that leaves him a threat to win again. And sure enough, remember I was telling you about those personal things that I was going through with Jordan? All of a sudden, after this turn, Jordan contacts me, and he says, "Well, I understand that, what I've done something that that's really offended you, and I like to keep the game in the game, and the personal shouldn't be that way. I have nothing but love and respect for you. I was going to come to Cascadia. I want to meet you and Greg and go out for a drink. And I was like, okay, I don't know whether this guy's being honest or he's just scared that I'm going to throw the game over to Josh. And I said, hey, look, Jordan, I I'm not really willing to listen to you because I gave you the chance. And then he did this thing where he said, in the Jewish faith, um, before somebody converts to Judaism, they're rejected 3 times by the rabbi or something like that. So he says, I'm just going to keep taking because that shows that they're serious. So you can just keep rejecting everything that I say, and my heartfelt apology, and my show of seriousness is that I'm just going to keep doing it until the point where you start to understand where I'm being genuine with you. And I said, hey, look, you know what? We can go through what happened, but ultimately that's not going to impact what I decide to do with my units at this point. And so I could tell he was sweating a little bit. Like he was a
yeah.
little worried at this point because
Never
you,
easy.
you play a great game, right? And he's played a fantastic game here, right? I mean, this is an incredible game. And as you said, like he's played a very unique Germany or sorry, very unique France where he's got a whole bunch of where he's controlling the board with armies. And France is traditionally, as you know, a fleet power. And all of a sudden, there's probably a whole bunch of panic going on in his mind of, what do I do? What do I do? Like, did I just blow this game by not being, cordial to somebody who tried to mend fences? Like, how angry is Riaz? Is he going to really ruin the game for me? Am I going to be this guy who came so close and did so well? And like, this was probably my one of my better final games ever, and I just fell short because of somebody's anger and frustration. And so the outcome was still in doubt at this point because I was ready to give a whole bunch of stuff to Josh, whatever I possibly could give to Josh. And I think Bradley going to Livonia really stunted that possibility.
He still could have done it.
I could have, and I tried.
I mean, you could have done it now. You disband York. You're all but laying it up for him.
Yep.
But no, doesn't happen.
No, the reason why was we felt it was more important, number one, that we get control of the North Sea.
Yeah.
And then from there we could still do the same convoy. The same option was still available to us. And then at that point it became Jordan smartly moved his fleets over, which I was kind of expecting, but now all of a sudden he had to bounce out of Heligoland, and we didn't want me to lose the center right now, because if I went down to 2, I wouldn't be able to hold
Kind of
back.
the move of the
Like,
game was Jordan going Holland to Helgoland here.
yeah,
Kind of the move of the game. Sealed it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Brutal.
And then the writing was on the wall. At this point, the game was over.
Well, yeah, because Josh can't win losing Budapest now. I
No.
mean, there's, it's pointless. Game's over. I don't know why it doesn't draw. I think Bradley had said because Greg wanted to increase his center count, something like that.
They had made a deal, which was revealed to me towards the end of the game, where the podium finishers would be France and then Turkey and Italy in whatever order. But France was going to win, and then the other 2 were going to do the rest, and Jordan was going to help them finish second and third.
I recall something now. It all comes together for me. Sometimes I'm slow. Jordan, I think right after this move, posted either on the finalist chat, which people couldn't see unless they're special finalists or diplomats, that he proposed a draw. And you said, no, I think I have other plans now. Because you had earlier said, I don't know why the game doesn't draw. And so I think that, may have led him to the convoy decision. Anyways, well, we didn't get many Lady Razor drawings. We got the one that I didn't go over with you earlier about the disband, the extra build, but the guy is just so good. We got the tanking. I love it. Uh, kind of summarized the game right here, actually, as he does so well. All right, and then
Lady Razor. He's
from
awesome.
there, how'd you keep London?
I told Jordan, I said, look, is there some vindictiveness here on your part? Like, just you don't need anything to win. I would appreciate having my home centers at the end of the game. And he's like, well, are you going to mess around with Denmark and do anything? And I said, no, I'm just gonna keep what I have, and I'm just gonna protect what I have. And he said, okay, then I'll just leave you alone.
All right, and the game is kaput. You did keep your home centers. Uh, and he got Denmark too at the end, which I forgot. So basically, you got Germany, the neutrals, and Denmark. No, 3 neutrals in Germany.
Yep.
Not the way, not the normal France 11, without an English home center or an Italian, no Tunis, no Italian centers. Um, Overall, you didn't win. I think I said multiple times, give me credit for this, that I thought you were playing the best on the board. I really did. I thought, for a while there, you were tap dancing. You had your chances. You made a move when you felt you had to try and win, and it didn't work out. But I'm not looking at this game, and I don't know if Keith did. I don't think I looked at this game. In retrospect, English Channel to IRC in spring 1908 solves all your problems. But if he had gone south, it may have created new ones. So it's very difficult to play this game in hindsight. I thought you played fabulous for a 3-center England, Keith.
I thought you did amazing. You got a lot of Fs at the end just because you could not show the people what was in their best interest and what made sense. And I know you said those things, and you can't make a horse drink water just because you lead them there. So I don't quite blame you, but just because you didn't get an ally, you're pretty much on a doomed path to failure. But I don't blame you because I know you said all the things that I would have said.
But France didn't have an ally, and he won the game.
We had Josh.
Yeah, Josh. That's all you need is someone who's not
Yeah.
going to read the board, or
He had Greg.
and Greg
I
didn't do it either. So
think we said that the game here really turned on this relationship between France and Italy. I mean, we could talk about these tactics, and Josh is kind of back and forth a little bit, but Italy had units out of position the whole time, but couldn't put any pressure on France. And this sort of détente that they had really drove the result in my mind.
he didn't have an ally, but he had apathy, and that's all he needed. That's all France needs is people not to care if you get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So, Riaz, we're at the point where, as you know, and we've given you a super long interview because I frankly thought you and Josh are probably the 2 most important interviews for people learning in the game. And frankly, the person who learns the most from these things is me. My game has improved doing these interviews, and I like people who are candid with you. But if there's something you haven't said that you would like to say, something I missed, it's your opportunity to say whatever you like.
There's not really much. I think with this game, there was a lot of balance play in this game, especially towards the end of the game. I think what I would say is don't give up on the game too early. I mean, there's a case in point, right, where Jordan was pushed back and he had all those armies sitting around Kiel, Berlin. He just lost Munich. He was losing steam. He didn't give up. He played the game. He played the game through, and he had a plan that worked really, really well for him. But then we look at Russia, and it was sort of the opposite, where for the first part of the game, he was running away with it because he didn't have a single enemy. then he started making enemies, and he couldn't find the will to come back and not give up. He gave up when he was in a strong position. So never give up. Like, don't until you're at 3 or 4, just don't give up. Just keep fighting, keep fighting, keep plowing away. That's what Jordan did. And it won him the game. Like, it won him the game. Jordan played a fantastic game. Yeah, I'm a little salty because he stabbed me a couple times, but at the same time, like, he played a fantastic game. And I think maybe what the lesson here is that don't be arrogant like me and think that you can hold off a great player like Jordan. Like, I mean, everybody's got their own game plan, but this guy he's a fantastic player. This guy, like, we've played like the Brandons, and we played the Peter McNamara's, and we played a lot of great players. Both of us have, Ed, and I would put Jordan on that level with Bradley, and maybe up with those guys, because he can play.
I put him up with there. I mean, I'm gonna, I have accurate. I'll give you my assessment of Jordan. I played 5 games with him, where I think he's probably got the better of me 3 of the 5. I got the better of him one time, and then one time we didn't fight. We were on opposite sides of the board. And he's fantastic at gunboat. He's fantastic at tactics. I don't think people know that, because his real reputation is what he's done on Web Dip and Play Dip and early days of Nexus. But a lot of those victories, he's going to get mad at me for saying this, we're against inferior competition. A lot of people come into games. He's very charming. He hasn't faced, except in these high level games, an enormous amount against really high level players. And he hadn't proven it on the big stage yet. He proved it here. He did prove it. And what he does really well in extended deadline, sort of like Greg sometimes, will be a challenge if he moves to some more virtual, which I see he's playing and did really well in virtual the other day. He's a fantastic player, tremendous upside, knows how to move the pieces, charming. I put him up with the very best. And I think he can learn the skill set of face-to-face or virtual, certainly better than me. But really well. And the other point I wanted to make, I hope people are listening here, because what you said about not giving in, it's a little bit of a life motto of mine. Okay, there's a baseball player from the Dodgers named Kirk Gibson, who hit the winning home run for the Dodgers to win the series. I think it was in '88. And he wrote a book, and his book was called Defeating the Beast. And he said his whole life, the beast was that little voice inside his head saying, you can't do it. And you play a game of baseball where the most successful players don't get on base 7 out of 10 times. And he said, you have to defeat the beast. You have to understand that is not the way to live life. And it's certainly not the way to play diplomacy. You have to keep trying and figure out how you can advance. It's probably why, Riaz, I'm not a good Janissary, as you know, because it's not in me to just I've done it a couple times, and it's just doesn't sit well with me. I'd rather try and do something, even in a losing cause, to advance my chances of winning. So I appreciate you saying that, because it's literally how I think about life, because it beats you down a ton, and everyone has their challenges and hardships, and it's how I like to play diplomacy. So thank you for saying that.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Well, we're probably going to make this 2 more episodes, but thank you very much for your time, and you have a good evening. Thank you for being so patient.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
For a taste of your whiskey, I'll give you some advice. You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done.